Hey, welcome to Force Fandom. I'm Taylor Olmstead, and that's Emily Bamforth.
Hey.
And we are wrapping up our coverage of the original run of Gilmore Girls. Emily has been making me watch episodes from throughout the early seasons of Gilmore Girls to kind of get a feel for the show and whether or not I like it, as that is the premise of this podcast. And this week we watched season 4, episode 2, The Lorelai's First Day at Yale.
Not season 4, episode 1, which I thought was Lorelai's first day at Yale.
Yeah, she actually made me watch 2 episodes this week, but I like her enough that I did it anyway.
You are one of the few, my friend. You are one of the few.
So why did you pick this episode?
I picked this episode, even though it's a bit of a leap again, and that's not inconsistent with the rest of the episodes that I've made you watch. But it is Rory's first day at Yale. Note I said Yale, not Harvard. If you remember, Taylor, Rory and Lorelai were convinced that Rory was going to go to Harvard. And then I almost had you watch the episode where they made the decision for Rory to go to Yale, because it's a very big deal. Rory's grandfather went to Yale, loved it, and therefore Lorelai hated it. And so it was a very big decision when, even though she got into Harvard, spoiler, she chose Yale because there were too many pros for her not to. So the reason I chose this is because it's a really great going to college episode, and I think it's one of the best that I've ever seen of oh my God, the kids in the sitcom are moving out of the house.
Yeah, this was definitely everything you would expect from a going away to college episode. Complete with nagging mom taking pictures of everything. It really did feel like going away to college, which I think is part of the reason the first 20 minutes of it annoyed the hell out of me.
When I went away to college, my mom was so much like this. And there's a bit in here, I believe, where Lorelai sees other stuff that parents are buying for their kids to go to college. And when I went away to marching band camp, my mom completely pulled that and came back with a rug and a foot spa. I am not kidding. She saw somebody with a foot spa and decided Emily should have that.
I mean, my mom wasn't that intense, but there was definitely a trip to Walmart immediately after we got to my freshman dorm where we bought more stuff, I think, than I brought with me to the dorm.
Taylor and I went to the same college, and the Walmart is the only place you can go when you have one of those trips in Athens, Ohio.
And the Walmart on move-in day is the worst place on earth.
It's hell.
Absolutely terrible.
It's very bad. It's full of Lorelais. They're running around like crazy, trying to buy mattress toppers and
who knows
everything.
What else. And I think
ramen.
I think that was part of the reason why this episode was really irritating to me, at least in the first section. And my roommate actually walked in partway through it and watched a little bit. And I was like, man, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this. And he was like, yeah, they're all being really whiny. And I think that kind of encapsulates the first 20 minutes of this episode for me, where I was like, I just don't want to deal with this whining anymore. I'm over it. I'm done.
Yeah, I know. I gotcha. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about some whining. So, as you said, we can go through this in kind of blocks, because the first part, you literally can imagine what it's like when Rory and Lorelai are packing for college. Rory is packing everything. Lorelai is driving Luke's truck because, it's Luke, so he has to be involved in the move-in day, but doesn't know how to drive a stick. Nobody's happy with the going to college photo. Lorelai still can't drive, and eventually Doesn't Luke drives her, right?
Luke makes the second trip where they get all the extra stuff that they forgot about.
Oh yeah, that's right. He doesn't drive the first time. So just basically, there's this whole bit with Lorelai in the truck because it's funny to see women not know how to drive apparently. And this is a new thing for you. Luke is worried about his divorce.
Well, I actually watched the episode before this, and so I know that Luke is getting a divorce because he got married on a cruise and is now getting a divorce.
Doesn't it make more sense when you watch more episodes?
It sure does. It sure does.
Wouldn't it be nice if you had watched every episode up until now?
I mean, probably, but I don't have time for that.
I have time for that. If I have time for that, you have time for that.
Whatever. Yeah, so Luke is dealing with the lawyers, and it's pretty funny to watch Luke try and talk to lawyers because he's really just not good at it.
Yeah. Nicole's lawyers, Nicole is a lawyer, if I remember. Correct me if I'm wrong. But so lawyers for lawyers are even more annoying than just dealing with lawyers. And Luke isn't good at dealing with lawyers in general. So he's just stressed out in general. And then they go to Yale.
So, yeah, they go to Yale, and Rory loses part of her map, and she's really upset, and they get into the suite, and then they have to go back out of the suite so that they can then live in the moment and actually go through the suite for the first time. I thought that bit was kind of cute, the whole idea that, like, Rory is so stressed out and reading all the maps and reading all the pamphlets and memorizing all the things that she doesn't actually experience her first day of college. That was kind of funny.
It's very Rory.
It is very Rory. And then they meet Rory's sweet mate, who is fittingly weird as weird can be, which
she's 16.
She's 16 and adopted and isn't good at conversation, so she just spouts off random facts. And when I first saw her, I was like, oh man, this is going to be a cheesy roommate subplot. But then when they like kind of MacGuffin you on that, and like she is not the roommate that you think she is. That was really interesting, and she also reminded me a lot of some of my roommates that I had freshman year, so that was fun. But of course the big reveal comes when you realize that her actual roommate that's sharing the room off the suite with her is none other than Paris.
Oh my god. And Paris has a life coach.
Paris does have a life coach. I think Paris's life coach is the unsung hero of Gilmore Girls.
I think Paris is the unsung hero of Gilmore Girls. I love Paris.
But she wouldn't be lovable if she didn't have a life coach.
That's not true. Paris has been lovable all by herself.
I disagree with that statement, but keep going.
So, Terrence heard about Rory and decided that Paris and Rory were not done.
Yes, so they had not completed their journey together.
So, and you know what? To be honest, I didn't think they had either. So there was this whole bit before, which you missed, where Paris didn't get into Harvard. And Paris also really wanted to go to Harvard, but Rory got in and Paris didn't. Because Rory gets everything for no apparent reason.
Because the plot says so.
Because the plot says so. And so Paris had this whole breakdown about it. And so this is kind of like, you can see the end of this this plot where Paris has an emotional breakdown. With now she has a life coach on top of a nanny. She also has a nanny back home. So, yeah, Paris and Rory are roommates. That's going to lead to some crazy hijinks, especially with some other actors in the mix.
It sure is. But I tell you what, the dynamic is pretty interesting already. I like the whole bit about, like, Paris is lying to her life coach a little bit, and she isn't, like, super happy about this whole idea of living with other people, and neither is Rory, and so they're kind of, like, commiserating together a little bit, and they both think that their other roommate is super weird because she is. So, I mean, I don't know. This is a dynamic that I think has some legs.
Yeah, it has some legs. And by that, we mean 3 more seasons. Lorelai, there's this whole bit where she goes back and she gives this character witness thing for Luke and, like, says a bunch of nice things. And then I don't think so this is really important. And then she, like...
That whole subplot is really not that important.
And then there's this whole bit about how Luke can't drop off the old mattress without taking taking the old mattress.
Yeah,
Put the mattress here. Where do we put the mattress?
the whole mattress thing. Just
Da,
cut
da,
it.
da, 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 da. It's charming in practice, but not so much when you're discussing plot. Anyway, so that's a thing. And so Luke is kind of involved in Lorelai and Rory's move-in day, which is really cute because Luke has been Rory's father figure for as long as she can remember because Christopher is a bag of poop. So to put it eloquently.
And so kind of the like climactic moment here is when Luke and Lorelai finally leave Yale, and then as soon as they get back to Stars Hollow, Lorelai gets a page from Rory because, you know, it's still the early 2000s, and it says come back with 12 exclamation points. And so Lorelai's motherly instincts kick in, and she takes Luke's truck and she drives back to Yale and has a sleepover with her daughter during her first night of college, because that's not weird at all.
This is super normal. It's cute, but then you grow up and you're like, holy moly, that's weird. Like,
yeah, as a teenager watching this, I'm sure it was adorable, but as an adult watching this, I'm like, man, this is really weird, and somebody should probably stop this.
Yeah, like somebody has like a major like mommy issues. Like, it's really bad. Like, Laura, it's actually one of the you see this happening, but like this is a major crack in Rory's armor. Like, Rory is meant to be this smart, like successful kid who's independent and all this, and really she depends on her mother for pretty much everything. All of
and
her
you can tell that
support.
here because she makes all of her friends through her mother. Her mother throws a party in their suite and orders delivery from all of the delivery places in town so they can grade them on food, price, and hotness of delivery drivers, which was a plot that I thought would be really funny if it weren't initiated by Rory's mom.
Yeah, it would have been funny if Rory like thought of like Lorelai and was like, what would Lorelai do?
And then like made a bunch of charts and graphs and did this.
Yeah, that would be hysterical, and it would be very Rory because of the charts and also the graphs. But it isn't. And so, like, when I was younger, this had, like, such a very sweet... You're right, it's sweet. It's sweet when they're, like, howling to the guys next door, and I'm like, oh, maybe this is what college is going to be like. Which it was, but without my mother. And,
Key difference.
I did not have my mother sleep. She made a joke that she was going to do that. I'm like, don't do that. I love my mother very much, but this is very weird. And so, but at the end of the day, they have a cool takeout chart now. So that's nice. I'm going to start doing that whenever I move somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, this seems like a great way to get to know your neighborhood. I recently moved, and we've still been ordering our Chinese from the Chinese place from our last house. And so I think maybe we need to break out some charts and figure out, you know, where we can actually Lorelai the best Chinese food.
Please tell me when you do that and show me your chart.
Will do.
So basically it goes fine. And by the time they're all done, Rory is like much more settled, has some friends, you know, will now be forever known as the like Lorelai's daughter on the floor. And so they go and they get coffee and stuff, and they're like, oh, we're going to go lose our IDs so we can get new ones and like all that good stuff. So Rory's settled, and the last goodbye is easier, but then Lorelai goes home and just looks around. And it's a very...
You have to have that last shot of the college episode where mom comes home and just looks around an empty house.
But when you think about it, it's even more poignant because Lorelai started... Let me explain to you why this is poignant. I'm going to mansplain to you this series, but Lorelai started her... She'd never had a college experience, right? She got pregnant when she was 16. She never had that person to college. She never had, like, I'm leaving my parents for reasons other than she got pregnant. Her entire adult life she's had Rory that entire time. She's had Rory. She's never been somebody without Rory as an adult. And like normally, I guess you're an adult for at least like a few years. Not normally, but conventionally, you're at least an adult for a few years before you have your kids. And you kind of shape your identity without them there. And so Lorelai literally has just lost like 50% of her identity, I feel. And so that's why that's so poignant to me, more so than the, oh yeah, this is a like traditional nuclear family who send off the older son to college. Like Lorelai's alone now. And it kind of sets a tone for the rest of the series.
Yeah, it was sad. I mean, that's what you want me to say. Like, it was sad. I feel like I've seen this done a lot of times, and so in my old jaded age, it just doesn't feel different to me.
Okay, that's fine. Maybe without the 4 seasons of emotional investment, you may not feel as strongly about it as I do.
Could be.
Yeah. So, and that's the end of the episode.
And I guess that's kind of the end of our merry little experiment here with Gilmore Girls.
Yeah. How does it feel?
You know, it feels different than I expected. When we first started doing this, I really thought that the show was going to be very girly. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely not. Like, it's not as romantic and cutesy as I expected it to be. It's very raw at moments, and it's very, emotionally dense. Mm-hmm. I do think, though, that it's a show that's written for teenagers, particularly teenage girls and their moms. And this episode and a few of the other ones, but especially this one, like we were talking about earlier, they just really don't resonate as well as you get older.
Right.
And I think that may be why at the end of this, I'm not as like over the moon about it as you are, because I just waited too long in life to see this.
So, Taylor, here's the question, and I think you've already answered it. Are you now a fan?
I don't think so. I don't think Gilmore Girls is necessarily for me, which is something we've talked about too. But I mean, it's a show that I will watch if it's on, or if I'm with somebody and they want to watch Gilmore Girls. Like, I'm not going to say no. I find it entertaining. I'm just not going to seek it out on my own, I don't think.
You're not a fan?
I'm not a fan.
So, after the first 2 seasons of Forced Fandom, I called myself a fan of Twin Peaks, and Taylor did not call himself a fan of Gilmore Girls.
I didn't return the favor, Emily, and I'm sorry. I just couldn't do it.
You snob. No, but I get where you're coming from, and I think that if I watched it, I know a lot of people who watched it in adulthood, but I don't think if I didn't have the history that I had with it, I would be quite as rabid a fan of it as I am now. And I think I see a lot in it now that I didn't see then. And yeah, it's a show which I appreciate, I think, because of its writing. It's parts of it, right? It's not the sum of it that I like. Mm-hmm. Except that's not true. I like all of it. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going down this rabbit hole. I am a fan. You are not. But I do not call you wrong for not being a fan, because you tried it.
Yeah, and I think there is a lot of merit to what you said, where there are parts of it that you like, and then there's the sum of it as well. And I think that's kind of the way you have to experience the show if you're coming to it later in life. Like, you have to evaluate it based on its parts. Because there are things that the show is trying to do and messages it's trying to tell a teenager that may not be appropriate for you if you're watching it in your 20s. But at the same time, as a teenager, you're not going to identify with Lorelai, and you're certainly not going to identify with Emily. And so when you watch the show later in life, you do identify with those characters more, and it becomes kind of a different show for you. And I think that's the true value of this show, is that it's going to be different for everybody that watches it based on the age where they experienced it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. A lot of women I know, I'm surrounded by women who very much thought of themselves as Rory when it first came out, and now they're like, Rory's kind of the worst. And I don't appreciate, they're like, I don't appreciate it. And I'm like, I know, but I feel like she was always that way, and we just saw parts of her that we connected with. And it's definitely, I definitely love it, and I definitely love watching it, and I definitely appreciate the role it had in my life. But I understand why someone who hasn't been through it the way that I have doesn't feel that way. Whereas like Twin Peaks, I feel isn't that way. It doesn't like connect to your formative experiences in life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's something you can kind of pick up at any point.
And it's based on humor more so, and like the way you think about things than your growth in your life experience.
That's
if that
true.
makes sense.
So that kind of brings us to another question I wanted to ask. We kind of intentionally chose two shows that are both getting reboots. Gilmore Girls has already had its, and the Twin Peaks reboot is coming out later this year. What was your experience with the Gilmore Girls reboot and revisiting these characters later in life?
A lot of people had really negative experiences with the Netflix reboot. And I did too, in a way. It made me think about a lot of things in terms of how I metagamed a little bit, meaning like I was paying attention to what I knew from the writers and what I knew from writer interviews and what I knew about the fact that Amy Sherman Palladino wanted this storyline to be at the end of season 6 and not season 7. And definitely not when Rory was in her 30s, which is when the show is set. And so I think the major flaw there is that they didn't age up, but like they didn't mature the storyline to reflect how much time had passed. It's a storyline that would have done really well as a season 7, but didn't do well for that reason. Emily's storyline was fantastic. Lorelai's was a little cliche, but it was fine. But Rory really lost her way. And I think a lot of people had a problem with the perfect child that they saw and connected with and identified with. And as well as Lorelai to a degree, there were a lot of think pieces about, oh my God, we all just realized that Lorelai and Rory are terrible people. Like, everybody kind of had that same thought. And when I go back and rewatch the series, I definitely see that more. Like, they're written to be charming, but at their base, outside of the charming dialogue and the fact everyone loves them, they're actually like not very good people. And it's there are a lot more flaws. And I think a lot of people had a problem emotionally dealing with that.
I think that's something that we could potentially run into with Twin Peaks as well. Not so much like the characters are flawed, because a big part of that show is like showing you how everybody has flaws, and some of those flaws are worse than you would expect. But I think we're going to go into the Twin Peaks reboot expecting it to be, groundbreaking, or expecting the plots to be like completely crazy and just blow our minds. And I'm totally fine with it ending up just being another murder mystery. Like, if it is just another 8-part miniseries, True Detective style dark crime show with these characters that we've grown to love, I think I'll be okay with that. But I don't think the fandom will be, because they expect something deeper, because they've had years and years to read into the show,
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of how the Gilmore Girls reboot went too, if I read it correctly. Is like everybody had read their own childhood into these characters, but then coming back to new episodes with the same people, they realized, like what those characters really were.
I think that's really true, and I really wish that I could comment on the Twin Peaks thing, but I'm still in the beginning of season 2 because I abandoned it because I have a lot of TV I need to watch.
Yeah, and there's not like anything pressing you to finish watching TV from 1990.
Yeah, weird, huh? Except for now, the reboot has a date, right?
Yeah, May 21st. So you have like 3 months.
Yeah, I've got time, ma'am. Luckily, I have kind of a peg because I'm going to do a shameless plug here. I write TV recommendations for the website I work for, cleveland.com. And when I watch that, which will probably be closer to May, I can write about it. And I'm really excited.
If people want to keep hearing your musings about TV and pop culture and all of those things, where can they do that?
They can find me on Twitter at Emily M. Bamforth.
And if you want to hear my ramblings and musings, you can find me on Twitter as @TC Olmstead. Thank you so much for listening to Forced Fandom, and we'll see you around.